Welcome to a special edition of AI Unraveled. I'm your host, Etienne Newman. Before we dive into today's autopsy, a quick reminder. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to subscribe to AI Unraveled directly on Apple Podcasts so you can enjoy this special strategic briefing and all our daily episodes completely ads-free. Today's episode is brought to you by DjamgaMind. As we will discuss today, the corporate world is starving for auditability and governance. DjamgaMind is the premier audio intelligence network, providing exact technical forensics and legal decoding for the C-suite. If you are navigating the enterprise trust gap, visit DjamgaMind.com. Today, we look at the strategic misalignment of the decade. OpenAI has just purchased a massive media megaphone designed exclusively for the technology sector's elite. But corporate CIOs don't care about startup hype. They care about compliance risk. Let's unravel why OpenAI's competitors have a golden opportunity to capture the trillion-dollar enterprise market by mastering the regulatory narrative.
In April 2026, OpenAI bought a media company that was perfectly on track to make $30 million a year in advertising revenue.
A massive proven revenue stream.
Right. And the very first thing they did, they unplugged the money machine. Like, they entirely killed it.
Which is just wild to think about.
Exactly. So today we are performing a forensic autopsy on why an $852 billion artificial intelligence giant would intentionally set fire to a proven business model.
Because, it completely defies traditional mergers and acquisitions logic. When a company deploys hundreds of millions of dollars, you expect direct market expansion,
Yeah, you want a return on that investment.
Right. But this requires a completely different kind of analysis.
Definitely. So for this deep dive, we are acting as lead forensic business strategists and M&A analysts. We are going to uncover what we're calling the enterprise blind spot.
It's a huge blind spot.
It really is. And we've got an incredible stack of sources for you today. We're talking highly sensitive forensic audits of the deal, enterprise software adoption analytics, and a slew of legislative compliance trackers.
Including deep technical breakdowns of the EU AI Act and Texas SB 1188.
Right. Because the big tease here, the underlying current making this transaction so fascinating, is the disconnect.
Well, the disconnect is massive. OpenAI basically just spent a fortune to buy a Silicon Valley hype machine.
Yeah.
But when you look at the forensic data, they are completely missing what Fortune 500 companies like the actual drivers of the global economy are buying.
Because enterprise companies are not buying cultural hype.
No, not at all. They are buying compliance and safety.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at the actual mechanics of this deal because they are staggering.
They really are.
So we are in the second quarter of 2026. OpenAI is sitting at an astronomical $852 billion valuation.
Yeah, this is right after that massive $122 billion funding round.
Exactly. And they decide to buy the Technology Business Programming Network, or TBPN.
A daily live tech talk show.
Run by John Coogan and Jordy Hayes. And it's incredibly popular with a very specific elite demographic, right? Like venture capitalists, founders, Silicon Valley insiders.
Yeah, and we have to perform a clinical autopsy on this deal structure because it deviates from every traditional media consolidation playbook.
It makes no sense on paper.
Right. We know the transaction was in the low hundreds of millions of dollars, which is a massive premium for an 11-person media team.
Seriously.
But the real anomaly is that revenue model. Pre-acquisition, TBPN was highly profitable. As you mentioned, they were projecting $30 million in ad revenue by the end of 2026.
And they had massive corporate sponsors like Google's Gemini, Ramp, the New York Stock Exchange.
Exactly. And the second the ink was dry, OpenAI shut that advertising business down.
Just turned it off.
Yeah. And instead of letting TBPN run as an independent, profitable media subsidiary, they absorbed that 11-person team directly into their internal strategy organization.
Reporting straight to Chris Lehane, their chief global affairs officer.
Right.
It's like buying a profitable radio station just to turn off the commercials and only play your own band's music. Why on earth would an executive team intentionally burn a $30 million proven ad model?
Well, because the motive isn't direct revenue. The motive is narrative capture.
Narrative capture. Okay, break that down for me.
We really have to look at the climate OpenAI was operating in during early 2026. They were facing mounting intense public scrutiny.
Oh, for sure.
There were expansive copyright infringement lawsuits moving through the courts, controversies about military applications of their tech.
And didn't Sora quietly die around then, too?
Exactly. There was the quiet, abrupt death of their Sora video generation tool as they unsuccessfully tried to pivot toward enterprise coding.
Right.
They were bleeding control of their own story.
So instead of fighting the press, they just bought the microphone.
Precisely. They needed an unfiltered, direct mechanism to speak to developers, to venture capitalists, and to ecosystem builders.
That makes sense.
By killing the ad model and subsidizing TBPN internally, they effectively transformed a commercially viable media outlet into a corporate apparatus.
Right, which allows them to cultivate a very specific pro-builder narrative.
Exactly.
It basically insulates their core audience from the broader media's skepticism and, all those regulatory warnings. And honestly, it's a brilliant move if your goal is to win the culture war in Silicon Valley.
Oh, absolutely.
But this strategy violently collides with the reality of corporate buyers. Hype works on founders, sure, but what happens when that cultural hype meets corporate procurement?
Well, it stalls out. Utterly, we are seeing a massive enterprise stall right now.
Let's talk about that data.
Yeah.
Because it's wild.
Yeah, McKinsey's data shows that 88% of organizations are currently using AI in at least one business function.
88%.
Right. But here's the critical metric. 95% of enterprise generative AI pilots yield absolutely zero P&L impact.
Zero.
Zero. Only 5% have actually integrated AI tools into core workflows at scale.
Okay, wait, I have to push back here. Wait, models are smarter than ever. Why the sudden stall? I mean, I use AI every day. I use it to draft emails. I use it to brainstorm structural edits, and it saves me hours.
Sure.
So how can McKinsey claim 95% of these pilots have zero P&L impact, meaning zero actual profit and loss improvement? If the tech is so smart, why isn't it making or saving companies obvious money?
Well, because there's a massive difference between personal productivity and autonomous enterprise deployment.
Okay, fair.
What you are describing is personal assistance, but the enterprise market is shifting toward agentic AI.
Right, agents.
Right. These are systems designed to autonomously reason, use tools, and execute decisions without a human clicking approve every 5 seconds.
Which sounds great, but
that introduces what we call the trust gap. It is not about compute power anymore. It is entirely about governance.
oh, you're saying companies literally do not trust the software to act on its own.
Exactly. Deloitte's 2026 report found that 64% of organizations are terrified of hitting their agentic AI goals, specifically because they lack the governance structures to monitor those autonomous decisions.
Wow, 64%.
Yeah. If an agent has the power to move money, read proprietary databases, or interface with clients, the corporate fear of liability paralyzes deployment.
That makes total sense.
And Gartner noted that through 2026, 60% of all enterprise AI projects will be completely abandoned because of poor data readiness.
Because you cannot run an advanced autonomous agent on fragmented, siloed data.
Exactly. It might accidentally pull a confidential HR file and email it to a sales team.
Look, the AI landscape moves faster than a hallucinating LLM on a double espresso, which is why Etienne has done the heavy lifting for you. Stop scrolling through generic top 10 lists and head over to DjamgaMind.com/toolkit for the AI Executive Toolkit. It's a hand-picked, forensic-vetted implementation stack featuring tools like Chatbase, 11 Labs, and ARI, complete with exclusive listener perks to get your firm running at light speed.
And, implementing properly vetted tools like that is critical because this governance failure isn't just a theoretical fear of breaking an internal system.
Right.
Enterprise buyers are stalling because they are staring down the barrel of punitive legal liabilities.
So wait, what kind of penalties are we actually talking about here? Let's get into the specifics.
Well, let's look at the legislative frameworks in your source stack. Take Texas SB 198.
Okay.
That took effect and became strictly enforceable at the start of 2026. This law specifically targets healthcare data and AI.
And what does it do?
It strictly enforces data localization, meaning it outright bans the physical offshoring of electronic health records.
Oh, wow. How does that work mechanically for a hospital? I mean, they use cloud computing just like everyone else, right?
Right, but it means they cannot just use any global cloud provider. If an AI is transcribing a doctor's visit, that audio data cannot be processed on a server sitting in another country.
It requires a massive architectural audit of where the physical servers are located.
Precisely. And furthermore, Texas SB 1188 mandates manual human physician review for any medical documentation produced with AI assistance.
before it becomes part of the official record.
Exactly.
Which completely defeats the purpose of autonomous efficiency. If a human doctor still has to read and sign off on every single word the AI generated, you haven't saved any time.
Right.
What happens if a hospital skips that step and just lets the AI update the record?
It is a $250,000 fine per instance.
Wait, per instance, as in per patient file?
Patient file, yes.
That is insane.
And that is just one state. When we cross the Atlantic and look at the European Union, the EU AI Act is now fully operational.
Right, with rigid enforcement deadlines for high-risk systems by August 2026.
Exactly. If you deploy an AI system in employment, credit scoring, or healthcare, you need mandatory technical documentation.
And continuous human oversight.
And bulletproof data governance.
And the penalties there.
Up to 35 million euros, or 7% of global annual turnover.
7% of global revenue. That's a company-ending fine.
It is, and it has extraterritorial scope. If an AI system's output is simply utilized within the EU, a global company is fully exposed to that liability.
So what does this all mean? It completely clarifies the blind spot we are talking about.
If we connect this to the bigger picture.
Right. Because a corporate compliance officer at a Fortune 500 company who is sweating over a 35 million euro EU fine or a $250,000 penalty per patient in Texas.
They do not care about an exclusive TBPN interview with a tech CEO.
No. They don't care about venture capital, draft picks, or cultural hype. They need cryptographic proof that an autonomous agent isn't illegally sending patient data to an overseas cloud.
They need verifiable data lineage. Which leads us to a profound realization regarding the TBPN acquisition.
Which is?
OpenAI has purchased a very expensive, very loud megaphone for a demographic that does not control enterprise software budgets.
Wow. They bought the culture, but they abandoned the compliance layer. But tech journalism is totally obsessed with covering the culture. You open any tech blog, and it's all about the executive drama, the product benchmarks, the valuation multiples.
Yeah, it's all hype.
No one is explaining the operational mechanics of AI compliance.
And nature abhors a vacuum. Because traditional tech media ignores the mechanics of compliance, a massive, incredibly lucrative information void emerged.
And what's filling it?
It is being filled by a rapidly growing paradigm we call regulatory media.
Regulatory media, okay.
This is a complete departure from the cheerleading tone of traditional tech coverage. Regulatory media is forensic analysis.
Right.
It is dedicated to mapping these black box model outputs into defensible, legally compliant audit trails for risk officers and enterprise architects.
Because a black box model is inherently illegal in certain contexts now.
Right. Exactly. If an AI model denies a citizen a bank loan and EU regulators demand to know exactly which specific data point triggered that denial, a black box model physically cannot tell you.
The math is too opaque.
Right. That inability to explain the decision is now a massive legal liability. Demand for this kind of specific analysis is astronomical.
I can imagine.
Yeah, between 2023 and 2025, regulatory-themed media coverage surged by 265%. As the market demands technical forensics and legal decoding over basic product type, audio intelligence networks are becoming critical infrastructure. DjamgaMind provides exactly this actionable compliance intelligence for licensed professionals. Visit DjamgaMind.com.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. What does actionable compliance intelligence actually look like in practice? Because, compliance intelligence can sound like a corporate buzzword.
Sure.
If I'm a chief information security officer, a CISO listening to this, what am I actually supposed to be doing differently tomorrow based on regulatory media?
It is intensely instructional. For example, a CISO learns how to technically integrate an AI vendor's complex logging architecture directly with their company's internal SIEM.
Their security information and event management software?
Right.
Explain how that integration works.
Well, your SIEM is the central dashboard that monitors all suspicious activity on a corporate network. Regulatory media teaches a CISO how to configure the AI's API so that if an autonomous agent suddenly tries to download 10,000 sensitive customer emails.
Which would be a disaster.
Exactly. The AI instantly triggers an alert in the SIEM, and the network automatically revokes the AI's access before the data can be exfiltrated.
Oh, wow.
Or regulatory media legally decodes whether a foundational model's default data retention policy is quietly violating the GDPR's strict processing mandates.
So it's the translation layer between the raw math of a large language model and the strict text of the law.
Precisely.
And while OpenAI is busy subsidizing tech talk shows to win the narrative war, its primary competitors, companies like Anthropic, Mistral, Google and Microsoft are actively weaponizing this exact compliance layer.
This is the competitor playbook, and it is brilliant. Let's look at Anthropic.
Okay.
They made a phenomenally bold move in late February 2026. They flat out refused a U.S. government request for unrestricted military AI use.
Right. They drew a hard line against mass domestic surveillance and autonomous weapons,
Yes.
which obviously cost them a fortune in defense revenue.
In the short term, yes.
Yeah.
But they sent a massive, undeniable trust signal to the Fortune 500.
Oh, because they showed they had boundaries.
Exactly. By proving they would actually walk away from money to uphold their safety framework, their business adoption skyrocketed to 24.4%.
That's huge.
And crucially, among businesses purchasing AI services for the first time, Anthropic started winning 70% of head-to-head matchups against OpenAI.
Wow. Risk-averse corporations saw a vendor that prioritized governance over growth.
Exactly.
But they had a major crisis right after that. In March 2026, 512,000 lines of Anthropic's proprietary Claude code leaked.
Yeah, that happened.
That should have been a catastrophic breach of trust.
It could have been. But because Anthropic engages so heavily with the concepts of regulatory media, they spun that leak brilliantly.
Oh, so.
It wasn't framed as a breach. It was framed as a transparent blueprint, demonstrating the necessity of zero-trust architecture.
Wait, explain zero trust in this context. How does a massive code leak prove that your security is good?
Zero trust is exactly what it sounds like. It's a security framework that assumes no user and no piece of software should be trusted by default.
Even if they're already inside the corporate network.
Exactly. You have to constantly verify permissions. When Anthropic's code leaked, forensic analysts looked at it and realized that Anthropic's internal architecture assumed breaches would happen.
Ah, so the code itself had highly compartmentalized permissions.
Yes. So even though the code was exposed, the core data models were structurally isolated. Anthropic used regulatory media to turn a vulnerability into a showcase of their elite security baseline.
That is wild.
They turned a leak into a procurement requirement.
That is a masterclass in enterprise marketing. Now, let's look at Mistral over in Europe. They are playing a massive infrastructure game.
Oh, absolutely.
They recently secured $830 million in debt financing to build a 44-megawatt data center near Paris, packing it with 13,800 GPUs.
Which is a fascinating strategic choice.
Right. I mean, I know what a hyperscaler is, those massive cloud providers like AWS or Google Cloud. They already have server farms all over Europe.
Right, they do.
So why would Mistral go into nearly $1 billion of debt to build their own physical hardware when they could just rent compute from a hyperscaler?
Because of a piece of legislation called the U.S. Cloud Act, combined with data sovereignty demands.
Okay, break that down.
The U.S. Cloud Act essentially allows United States federal law enforcement to compel American tech companies to provide requested data.
Regardless of whether those servers are physically located in the U.S. or in Europe.
Exactly.
Ah, so if Mistral rents from an American hyperscaler, their European client's data is technically exposed to U.S. jurisdiction.
Precisely. By spending that $830 million to build their own physical infrastructure in Paris, Mistral is actively selling data sovereignty.
They can mathematically guarantee a French bank or a German automaker that their proprietary data will never traverse foreign networks.
Exactly. And American courts have absolutely zero jurisdiction over their physical servers.
That is an incredible selling point. If you are a European enterprise, you don't care how funny or smart an AI is on a podcast. You care that using it won't trigger a 35 million euro fine or expose you to foreign subpoenas.
Exactly. And meanwhile, the American tech giants, Microsoft and Google, are deploying incredibly comprehensive governance stacks of their own.
Like what?
Well, Microsoft is rolling out things like Microsoft Purview, which automatically maps your AI usage to over 100 different regulatory frameworks.
Whoa.
And Agent 365, which specifically manages that terrifying autonomous agentic sprawl we talked about earlier.
So they're building the safety nets.
Yes. What's fascinating here is the underlying strategy uniting all of OpenAI's rivals.
Right.
By funding, acquiring, or aggressively partnering with regulatory media.
Yeah.
These forensic newsletters, these compliance intelligence platforms, these competitors are actively educating the market on the sheer terror of non-compliance.
Wow. And by doing so, they are legally disqualifying hype-driven, closed-box models from corporate procurement.
It's a pincer movement.
Yeah, you educate the compliance officer on the strict parameters of the law, you terrify them with the fines, and then you offer them the exact enterprise tool that mathematically proves their compliance.
They are building a formidable enterprise moat that cultural hype simply cannot breach.
It's impenetrable.
Yeah. If a company requires comprehensive data lineage and unredacted model explainability as a non-negotiable legal baseline, a closed ecosystem model becomes an immediate legal liability.
Which brings us right back to the start. It puts the TBPN acquisition into a harsh clinical light. So what does this mean for you listening right now?
It's the critical question.
Whether you are a software engineer building tools, a startup founder looking for product market fit, or an executive prepping for a brutal board meeting, you have to realize that the paradigm has fundamentally shifted.
It absolutely has.
The true value of artificial intelligence in 2026 is no longer found in what the model can do. We know they are powerful. We know they can reason. The value is in what you can legally prove the model is doing within a governed, auditable environment. Actionable compliance intelligence isn't just a defensive legal measure anymore. It is the new gold rush. It is the only key to unlocking true enterprise scale.
Which leaves us with a final, rather provocative thought to consider.
Let's hear it.
If the Fortune 500 relies completely on mathematically sovereign, open-source AI models to avoid these catastrophic compliance fines, will OpenAI's closed, heavily marketed ecosystem eventually be relegated to a high-end consumer toy?
Wow.
Will we see a future where the culture talks endlessly about OpenAI, but the real trillion-dollar global economy runs silently on the invisible, boring rails of highly auditable AI?
That is a fascinating question to leave on. Subscribe to AI Unraveled on Apple Podcasts to listen completely ads-free. And the next time you see a tech giant build a shiny new skyscraper or buy a massive media network, take a moment to look at the foundation. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
That concludes our special edition forensic audit on the dawn of regulatory media. The strategic signal today is procurement over hype. OpenAI has successfully monopolized the cultural bandwidth of founders and venture capitalists by acquiring TBPN. But they have purchased the wrong frequency. The trillion-dollar budgets of the Fortune 500 will not be unlocked by a talk show. They will be unlocked by auditability, data lineage, and legal defensibility. If competitors like Anthropic and Mistral want to win this war, they must weaponize the compliance layer by partnering with audio intelligence networks to dictate the rules of enterprise procurement. And speaking of enterprise procurement, look, the AI landscape moves faster than a hallucinating LLM on a double espresso, which is why I've done the heavy lifting for you. Stop scrolling through generic top 10 lists and head over to the AI Executive Toolkit at DjamgaMind.com/toolkit. I've handpicked and forensic vetted every tool on this list, from Chatbase and 11 Labs to Iria and Google Workspace, to ensure they meet the rigorous standards of a professional and the high-stakes needs of the AI Unraveled community. Consider this your curated implementation stack to bridge the gap between raw innovation and professional-grade governance, complete with exclusive listener perks to get your firm running at light speed. This episode was made possible by DjamgaMind. I'm Etienne Newman. Stay sharp and keep unraveling the future.